Hello, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today we are going to discuss the important news appearing on the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 7th February 2020. The news to be discussed has been presented on your screen and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So let's start our today's discussion. The first news appears on page number 9. It says, India, African countries resolve to fight terror. Lucknow Declaration urges need for stronger international partnership. So this news highlights about the Lucknow Declaration, which was adopted at the first India-Africa Defence Minister Conclave. So in this news analysis, let us go through the important highlights of this Lucknow Declaration. Now this topic becomes important from the perspective of current events of international importance in your prelims examination and for your mains gets covered under GS paper 2 specifically with respect to global groupings and agreements involving India. Now this topic becomes important as a question in prelims 2016 was asked by UPSC with respect to India-Africa Summit. It said, consider the following statements. The India-Africa Summit, number 1, held in 2015 was the third such summit. Second, was actually initiated by Jawaharlal Nehru in 1951. Question was, which of the statements given above are correct? So in this aspect, it becomes important to know also about the India-Africa Summit. Now as you can see, the first India-Africa Summit was held in 2008 in New Delhi, followed by the second summit in 2011 in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and the third was held in 2015 in New Delhi. So in this, the first statement becomes correct. However, the second statement becomes incorrect as the first India-Africa Summit was initiated in the year 2008 in New Delhi. So here the correct answer becomes A, that is 1 only. Now moving further to the important highlights of the Lucknow Declaration adopted at first India-Africa Defence Ministers Conclave. So this first India-Africa Defence Ministers Conclave was held in Lucknow and it coincided with the Defence Expo of 2020. And it was here where they adopted the Lucknow Declaration. So now let us go through the important highlights of Lucknow Declaration as adopted at first India-Africa Defence Ministers Conclave. So the defence ministers of both India and Africa decided to concentrate on the following issues or following areas, namely cooperation in defence preparedness, achieving conflict-free Africa, enhancing peacekeeping efforts in the region, exchange of experts between India and African countries, and also to emphasize on greater cooperation in defence sector. Now in cooperation in defence preparedness, the declaration appreciated the initiation of Africa-India field training exercises with the first ever F index in March 2019. And thereby they agreed that this cooperation between India and African countries will further strengthen cooperation in defence preparedness as well as security. In order to achieve conflict-free Africa, the declaration recognized that peace and security are key priority both for India as well as African countries. And this priority with respect to peace and security in the region also coincides with African Union's theme, which is silence the guns, creating conducive conditions for African development. And this vision is to achieve a conflict-free Africa, prevent genocide, make peace a reality for all, and get rid of wars which takes place within the continent. The declaration further aims to strengthen cooperation in enhancing peacekeeping capacity and peace building efforts, including support to the African Standby Force and also through courses such as those at the Center for UN Peacekeeping in New Delhi and also by other peacekeeping training centers in Africa. Further, with respect to exchange of efforts, the declaration aims to continue collaboration in peace and security through exchange of experts and expertise, through training programs, as well as capacity building, by enhancing peacekeeping efforts, and also through post-conflict reconstruction in Africa. Further, with respect to greater cooperation in defense sector, the declaration aims for deeper cooperation in the domain of defense industry, including investment in the defense sector, joint venture with respect to defense equipment softwares, research and development in the digital defense sector, provisioning of defense equipments as well as spares and maintenance. Now apart from these, the declaration also aimed at efforts to deal with terrorism in India and African countries, and also to put greater efforts for maritime security. So, with respect to terrorism, the declaration aims for collaboration to deal with these important challenges such as terrorism, extremism, piracy, organized crime, as well as human trafficking, drug trafficking, weapon smuggling, as well as other related criminal activities. Further, the declaration also called to strengthen the UN counter-terrorism mechanisms and also to ensure strict compliance with United Nations Security Council sanctions regime on terrorism. Further, the declaration also aims to enhance cooperation and coordination between Africa and India in order to combat terrorism in all its forms and manifestations and also to combat transnational crime. Now, with respect to maritime security, the declaration highlighted the importance of oceans as well as sea as it provides livelihood to many people. And it is in this regard that maritime security becomes a very important prerequisite for the development of blue ocean economy. So, in this regard, the declaration aims to increase cooperation in securing sea lines of communication, preventing maritime crimes, disaster, piracy, illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing through sharing of information and surveillance. Further, this declaration wants to enhance cooperation between India and Africa on the same lines or on the same concept as that of Indo Pacific. And in this regard, it welcomes the African Union vision for peace and security in Africa, as it also coincides with India's vision of Sagar with respect to maritime security, where Sagar stands for security and growth for all in the region. So, in this regard, the declaration support initiatives such as African Peace and Security Architecture, that is APSA, as well as Silence the Guns in Africa and Agenda 2063. So, this article becomes important both from our prelims as well as from our mains perspective, especially with respect to growing relation with African countries. The next news appears on page number 13. It says India to study air corridors with Central Asian countries. And this was said by the External Affairs Minister Jai Shankar and said that it required to expedite transport of goods, mainly perishable goods. Now, at the outset, it's important to know the five Central Asian countries. These are Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. So, the External Affairs Minister Jai Shankar at India Central Asia Business Council meeting said that the two regions, that is the Central Asian region and the Indian region, should examine the viability of establishing air corridors between them in order to boost trade as well as economic ties between the two regions. And this has been proposed mainly because of lack of efficient overland connectivity and also because of less trade between these two regions. The External Affairs Minister said that these air corridors would be similar to what India established with Afghanistan in 2018 and would include regular cargo flights having special clearing and custom facilities so that it can expedite movement of goods, especially the perishable products, including agricultural produce and fruits. So this topic becomes important from the perspective of current events of international importance in your prelims examination, and in your mains gets covered under GS paper 2, specifically with respect to regional and global groupings and agreements. Now, it's important to note that India, in this regard, has proposed to overcome this challenge with respect to overland connectivity between India and Central Asian regions through the Chabahar port in Iran, as the routes through Chabahar avoids instability because of Pakistan. Now, in this regard, India, Iran, as well as Afghanistan believes that the Chabahar port will become the fulcrum of connectivity for Indian goods to reach Afghanistan and also further north to these Central Asian countries. In the recently presented union budget, the government has allocated rupees 100 crore for the Chabahar port for the fiscal of 2020-21. So India want to boost its ties with the Central Asian countries by improving the trade between the two countries. And this can be achieved either by establishing air corridor, which the government of India is currently planning for, and also through movement of goods through the Chabahar port. However, the problem with Chabahar port is that the perishable goods cannot be transferred through this route as it takes a lot of time. So with respect to transferring perishable goods, especially fruits and agricultural produce, The air corridors will prove handy in order to boost trade ties between India and Central Asian countries. So, in this aspect, let us understand the importance of establishing air corridor with the Central Asian countries. Now, as already highlighted, because of the difficult terrain around the regions, it becomes very time consuming for consignment of goods to travel from one part of the region to another. So, this air connectivity or air corridor will facilitate or expedite such traveling time. So, first of all, it will help in reducing traveling time, thereby boosting trade, especially transfer of perishable goods, namely agricultural produce as well as fruits. Further, as of now, we have seen that trade between India and Central Asian countries is very low, roughly around $2 billion per year. So, this will further help in boosting trade ties between India and the Central Asian countries. Another important reason for developing an air corridor because of the geographical location of Pakistan as well as Afghanistan, as both these territories makes it difficult for trade through road. Also because of instability in Afghanistan because of the presence of Taliban. Now, another reason for air connectivity between Central Asia and India is because of the presence of external powers or external countries, namely Russia as well as China. And because there are porous borders, hence both these countries have increased their influence in the region. So, in this regard, it becomes important for India to have its presence in the region by boosting economic ties. And also because of the fact that China maintains a good relationship with Pakistan, and this can eventually hamper India's interest with Central Asian powers. So, because of all these factors, the government of India is planning for an air corridor between Central Asian region and India. Now moving to another important topic, that is importance of Central Asian region for India. Now India's ties with Central Asia can be traced back to the ancient Silk Road route, as India maintained good cultural and economic ties. So because of the historical relation which we maintained with the Central Asian countries, the Central Asian region becomes an important aspect to connect with. And in this regard, India's deep-rooted bonds with the region provides the perfect opportunity for both sides to capitalize on the existing relationship and also find new and innovative ways to enhance the current partnership between India and Central Asia. And in this regard, even the Central Asian countries are looking for viable partners, and India can become one such viable partner to enhance economic as well as cultural ties. Further, both sides, that is India and Central Asia, shares the common objective with respect to tackling radicalization as well as terrorism, to curb illicit trade, and also to promote economic cooperation between the region. So these common objectives of both Central Asia and India makes Central Asia an important place for India to invest in. Further, as already highlighted, increased presence of China and Russia in the region because of porous borders makes it imperative for India to have more investment in the region. Now, India's growing interest in the Central Asian region crystallized in the form of its Central Asian Asia policy, and this was achieved in the year 2012. Further, this policy was also reinforced in the year 2015 when Prime Minister Narendra Modi became the first Indian head of state to visit all five Central Asian countries. And this renewed focus on the region can be attributed to the changing geopolitics of the region, particularly because of Belt and Road Initiative of China, and also because of the external security threat in the region, mainly in the form of terrorism as well as illicit trade. So, the convergence of China's Belt and Road Initiative projects in the region with India's unrealized economic interest has prompted India to adopt a more proactive approach and look at new avenues for economic cooperation. Further, the regional security challenges in Central Asia also have the potential of spilling over into India, mainly because of radicalization and terrorism, and also because of the presence of Taliban as well as ISIS in the region. So, because of all these factors, Central Asia becomes an important place for India to enhance its ties, both in terms of economy as well as in terms of culture. Thus, this topic primarily becomes an important topic for your mains examination. However, questions can also be framed with respect to air corridor connectivity with the Central Asian country. Now, the next news appears on the editorial section on page number 10. It says, for a data firewall, the leak of medical information speaks to the urgent need for a data protection law. Now, this editorial highlights the loopholes with respect to Data Protection Bill 2019, specifically with respect to selling and transferring of sensitive personal data. And this loophole has been highlighted in this editorial in the backdrop of recent report by a German cybersecurity firm which mentions about medical data leak of Indian citizens. Now, according to this firm, medical details of millions of Indian patients were leaked online and are now freely available on the internet. So, in this backdrop, let us understand the important aspects of this editorial. Now, this topic becomes important with respect to general science in your prelims examination, and from mains perspective, it gets covered under GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 3. Now, this particular question was asked in 2017 in the mains of UPSC in GS paper 3. The question was, discuss the potential threats of cyber attack and security framework to prevent it. And it was asked to write the answer in 150 words. So we understand that issues relating to cyber attack or even data leak becomes an important subject. So in this backdrop, let us understand the views highlighted in this particular editorial. Now, with respect to the medical data leak, the firm listed 1.02 million studies of Indian patients and also 121 million medical images like CT scans, MRIs, photos of patients are easily available on the internet. And such information has potential for data mining or deeper data analysis and can also be used for creating profiles that can be used for social engineering purposes, for online identity theft, or can be utilized for other illegal activities which thrives on the darknet. Further, these online data leaks can also be misutilized by the corporates in order to create medical profile or other fake profiles of any patient. So, these data leaks becomes an important concern as it also infringes our right to privacy as it has been declared as a part of fundamental right under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution by the famous K.S. Puttaswamy judgment on right to privacy. Now the editorial highlights that most of these illegal activities on the internet thrives on the darknet. So in this aspect, let us understand about darknet. Now in the internet world, there are three aspects: surface web, deep web and dark web. Now majority of the internet activity carried on by common public is on the surface web, and this accounts for only 4% of the internet activities, whereas activities carried on in the deep web comprises protected information which are hidden from search engines like online banking details, medical records, legal documents, scientific proofs, subscription information, academic information, financial records, government records, etc. And then there are the now dark web is a network which is hidden within the deep web, and viewing these dark web requires special browsers. That is, these dark web cannot be viewed from normal browsers. So these special browsers can be Tor, that is the onion router. And activities on the dark web are totally anonymous. Hence, any activity on this dark web becomes very difficult to trace. Now the Data Protection Bill mentions about three important concepts, namely data principal, data fiduciary and data processor. So the person who gives their data becomes the data principal, as it says that data principal means the natural person to whom the personal data relates. The company, institution or the state authority which receives those data by the person becomes the data fiduciary. It says that data fiduciary means any person, including state, company or any juristic entity, who determines the purpose and means of processing of personal data. And data processor are those person, state authority or any company who process personal data on behalf of data fiduciary. So these data processor process these data on behalf of data fiduciary. So it is here where the 2019 bill allows for selling or transfer of data by the data fiduciary. So effectively, storage of data should be based on a rights-based approach and not on an economic approach. Now this is because government stores data for public welfare or public good and does not takes into account right-based approach or rights of an individual with respect to their data. And this mindset or this concept allows the government to use, monetize as well as exploit data for their own benefit and in any manner it desires, as long as these data are guarded against data breach or there is no unauthorized data access. So basically, this editorial mentions that this mindset of the government to use data in order to use, monetize, or exploit has provided a provision in Data Protection Bill 2019 which allows for selling, transferring of sensitive personal data by data fiduciary to any third party. Now, sensitive personal data, as per Data Protection Bill, includes or means such personal data which is related to or constitute financial data, health data, official identifier, sex life, sexual orientation, biometric data, genetic data, transgender status, intersex status, caste or tribe, religious or political belief or affiliation, or any other data categorized as sensitive personal data under Section 15 of Data Protection Bill. So, as a way forward, this editorial says that considering the report on medical data leak, there is a need for rights based data protection law, which includes comprehensive surveillance reform as well as prohibiting mass surveillance activities. Further, to provide for judicial oversight mechanism for targeted surveillance of certain people and also to prohibit selling of transferring of personal data by the fiduciary to any third party. Now, Arun sir, in his DNS dated 27 December 2019, had discussed the Data Protection Bill of 2019 in detail. So, to understand the important provisions of Data Protection Bill of 2019, including the background, you can go through the DNS of Arun sir dated 27th December 2019. The next news appears on page number 10 as a lead article. It says, Listening to the Call of the Informal. The voices of India's tiny entrepreneurs living in rural areas and the urban fringes should not be ignored by the government. Now, this article says that formalizing an informal economy will not help, and this idea is also supported in the two recent research papers published by the National Bureau of Economic Research and also in the background paper for International Labour Organization. Now, this topic in your prelims examination forms a part of Indian economy, basically with relating to economic and social development, and in your mains gets covered under GS paper 3 with respect to issues with respect to Indian economy and inclusive growth. Now, this article explains that the informal sector provides vast majority of opportunities both for its youth as well as for those working in the farm to earn livelihood or to earn incomes. And there is no strong evidence which suggests that formalization of the informal economy helps to improve business outcomes. So this article says that India's policymakers needs to look at the demerits of formalization from the perspective of informal sector enterprises and also from the perspective of ground realities of the informal economy, as the formalization of informal economy only benefits the state as well as the scheduled commercial banks, as it becomes easier to tax as well as monitor these small firms. Further, the article says that the formalization of informal sector only adds on to the cost for the firm, and this cost outruns the overall benefit for the informal sector. Further, the article argues that productivity of the informal sector depends on their soft skills, and these soft skills includes skills to form association, skills to manage enterprises, and also skill to provide mentoring to their peers. Further, the article says that the skills of small entrepreneurs and their employees are best developed on the job, and this is because they cannot afford the loss of income by taking time off for training. So the article says that considering all these aspects with respect to informal economy, there is a need for the government to reorient its policies towards the informal sector. So, with respect to reorientation of government policies towards informal sector, the article says that formalization of an economy only reduces the size of the informal sector. So, the government and its policy advisors should not denigrate the informal sector and try to reduce the size of the informal sector. The article further highlights that development of any economy from agriculture to production of more complex products is a process of learning. And in this aspect, the informal sectors provide space for transition for such people who does not have sufficient skills and assets to join the formal sector. So this article says that only by providing resources by the government such as money and buildings are not sufficient for the growth of small enterprises. Next, the article says that the government and the policymakers must learn to support informal enterprises on their own terms, and the government should not impose their own version of formality on the informal sector as it impacts the business negatively. So, the government, while framing policies, must cater to the bottom of the economic pyramid and should not only focus on making policies for the benefits of MNCs and large corporates. So, this article says that only making policies convenient for MNCs and large corporates will not increase growth of the economy if enterprises and incomes at the bottom of the pyramid do not grow. Hence, the government needs to focus on the bottom of the economic pyramid. Further, the article says that the needs and requirements of tiny entrepreneurs in rural heartlands and those who live on the fringes of Indian cities must be listened to while developing policies for ease of doing business. Next, the article says that networks and clusters of small business enterprises must be strengthened. It helps in the following ways. First, it improves the efficiency of small firms by enabling sharing of resources. Next, it gives these small enterprises more authority to bargain in their favor within the supply chains. And lastly, it reduces the last mile cost for agencies and providers of finance and other inputs to reach these tiny enterprises. This article further says that labor laws in India should be simplified and must provide for provisions to improve conditions of these workers in the informal sector. And further, these reforms must be implemented in the right earnest or in the right spirit. And finally, the article says that social security framework for all citizens must be strengthened, especially for those who have to scramble for work in the informal sector. So the government must provide for social security for those working in the informal sector. And with respect to these social security services, it includes health insurance, health services, disability benefits, as well as old age pensions. And in this regard, it says that health insurance and availability of health services must be improved, and disability benefits and old age pensions must be increased or enhanced. So, effectively, the government must provide for certain safety nets even for workers in the informal sector or in the informal economy. And all these reforms in the informal economy will help in strengthening the bottom rungs of the pyramid in the society and will overall help in increasing demand in the economy. The next news appears on page number 13. It says, panel suggests steps to curb child porn. And this panel is led by Congress MP Jairam Ramesh. Now this topic gets covered under GS paper 2, specifically with respect to welfare schemes for vulnerable sections of the population. So, the parliamentary committee led by Jairam Ramesh has recommended a number of steps to curb child pornography in India. Now, in this aspect, we must know the different laws dealing with child pornography. First is Section 67B of the Information Technology Act, as this provides for stringent punishment for publishing, browsing, or transmitting child pornography in electronic form. Further, Section 14 of POCSO Act provides for punishment for whoever uses a child or children for pornographic purposes. And Section 15 of the same Act, that is POCSO Act, provides for punishment for persons who stores any pornographic material in any form involving a child for commercial purposes. So these are the different laws in India which deals with child pornography. So in this aspect, let us go through the important recommendations of the committee. These primarily deal with broadening the definition of child porn, defining cyber grooming, code of conduct for internet service provider, strengthening National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, and use of technology to curb child porn. Now currently child pornography has been defined under POCSO Act, which says that child pornography is any visual depiction of sexually explicit conduct involving a child which includes photograph, video, digital or computer generated image. And in this regard, the committee has recommended broadening of this definition of child pornography to include a picture of nude or semi-nude child that is sufficiently sexually suggestive. Further, the committee has suggested to define cyber grooming. So, cyber grooming can be said to be an act of persuading, coercing, communicating, or arranging a meeting with a child with the intent of sexually abusing the child. And in this regard, the committee has recommended to introduce penal or criminal provisions for the same, that is, providing punishment for such activity. Further, with respect to code of conduct for internet service provider, the committee has recommended a code of conduct for these internet service providers to identify and remove child sexual abuse material and also to report such content who are trying to access them. And these reports must be provided to authorities under the National Cybercrime Portal. Further, the committee has said that National Commission for Protection of Child Rights should serve as the nodal body to curb child pornography in India. And accordingly, the committee has said that the body, that is NCPCR, should be provided with sufficient powers to deal with investigation as well as prosecution of related cases. Now, with respect to use of technology to curb child porn, the committee recommends technology-based solutions to curb circulation of child porn, such as the following. First, it says that the social media platforms should break end-to-end encryption to trace its distributors of child pornography. Further, the social media platform should deploy mandatory applications to monitor children's access to pornographic content. And in this regard, the social media content should also deploy photo DNA to target profile pictures of groups with CSAM, that is, child sexual abuse material. Now, photo DNA was developed by Microsoft along with Dartmouth College. This technology aids or helps in finding and removing known images of child exploitation. It says that today, photo DNA is used by organizations around the world and has assisted in detection, disruption, and reporting of millions of child exploitation images. Now, this photo DNA creates a unique digital signature known as hash of an image. So, once hash of an image is created, then it is compared with the existing hash in the database so as to find copies of the same image. And once a copy is found, then such a copy is removed from the entire internet. It says that photo DNA is not a facial recognition software and cannot be used to identify a person or object in an image. And also, photo DNA hash is not reversible and therefore cannot be used to create an image. Now, after a discussion, these forms your practice question for the day. Question number 1. It says, consider the following statements. First India-Africa Forum Summit was held in 2008 in New Delhi. Yes, this statement is correct. Second, first India-Africa Defense Ministers Conclave adopted the Lucknow Declaration. Yes, this is also correct. So the question is, which of the statements given above are correct? So the correct answer is C, that is both 1 and 2. Question number 2. Which of the following countries borders Kazakhstan? Options are Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, China and Pakistan. Now, as you can see in this map, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan as well as China borders Kazakhstan, but Pakistan does not border Kazakhstan. So in this, the fourth option is incorrect. Hence, the question is, select the correct answer using the code given below. So the correct answer is 1, 2 and 3 only, that is C. Question number 3. Consider the following statements. First, data principal refers to any person, state or company who processes personal data on behalf of data fiduciary. No, this is incorrect. Second, data fiduciary means the natural person to whom personal data relates. No, this is also incorrect. So the question is, which of the statements given above are correct? So here, none of the statements are correct. So the correct answer is D, that is neither 1 nor 2. With this, we come to an end to discussion of today's newspaper. Now there is an announcement. An account of election which is to be held tomorrow, there will be no DNS. So the next DNS shall be published on 9th February 2020. With this, let's move on to the question for the day.